So, in this third video I will explain you how to use the pin pairs landmarks system that are not just traditional landmarks which are just corresponding points between this mesh and this one. My system is a whole deformer by itself, and you can wait and visualize the result of the influence of each landmark. So the goal is not to add as many points as possible and expect a perfect interpolation between all the points like other software do, and that's why they need a lot of landmarks, like maybe up to 40 landmarks for matching two heads. In my case, we can just use most of the time 2 to 5 landmarks, and if you weight them properly you can have a good guide for the main registration process. So the goal is not to have a perfect result at this step, it's more to put areas that should go together on top of each other. So the deformation of the pin pairs occurs on top of initial alignment, so we can just put this one like this and then proceed with adding the landmarks. So I will just open the side view and do just a quick review of this. So there are two viewports, one for the reference mesh and one for the current matching mesh. On top you have this button that can unlink the view, so you can manipulate them separately, and then you can choose perspective, top, front, side, and these two buttons are for component and object mode. So you can add as many pairs as you want at the same time. You just need to make sure that you select one point from one mesh and then one point from the other, and then repeat the process. You can start with any mesh as long as you alternate the selection. I would not advise to add too many landmarks at the same time. You should start with 2 or 3 maximum and proceed with the weighting and adjust the weighting as much as possible, and then add more landmarks. Because if you add too many at the same time, maybe they won't be necessary and you could get lost in the weighting. So I will start by adding just one pair on the nose and then one pair on the tail. So once I have made my vertices selection, I just click on add pin pairs. So you can see by default it picked random colors, and the system created these little spheres here at the landmarks location. So these spheres are actually a custom locator node that I provide with the main deformer, and you can adjust the size and opacity, and when you pick them in the viewport, the corresponding parameters are displayed in the UI. So about the UI, for each section you have 3 buttons. The first one selects the vertices. So if I click on the top section, it will pick all the vertices for all the pairs. Then you can select per layer or just for each pair. The second button does the same but for the locators. And the last button is to delete. So if you click on the top delete button, it will delete all the pairs, and for the layer, all the layer pair, and then you can delete an individual one. So for the attributes of each pair, there are the vertex ID for each mesh. So for this particular pair, the reference vertex is this one and target this one. You can change the color if you want. You can change the influence mode, and I will show it later, and you can change the radius of influence and the softness, which is actually the drop-off. So let's go on the tail one, and so the radius at 0 it influences nothing, and at 1 it will influence all the mesh, knowing that for each layer all the weights are normalized. So in this case we have 2 points, and so if I put the radius to maximum, they will normalize at the middle. So if I decrease the radius of the nose, for example, the influence of the tail will be added here. So for the tail, if I reduce the influence, you can see that here we are in volume mode, so the influence of the tail is propagated to the legs too, and maybe that's not what we want, so I will just switch this mode from volume to surface. And here you can see that when I increase the radius, it will propagate along the tail and moving from there. And if I reduce the softness, it will just do a more sharp transition. At 0 there is no transition. At 1 it will just start from this point and decrease to 0 at maximum radius. So let's weight these two influence. So for the tail I will just stop here. For the nose I will increase the influence. And now I will add landmarks for the legs in order to make them align with the mesh. So here we have two symmetrical meshes, so we don't need to add landmarks for both sides, so we can just add for the front leg and the rear leg. And then I click on add pin pairs. So you can see now that the legs has been dragged on the ground. So if I weight them, You can see now that the tail has been influenced by the leg. So that's because we are in volume mode. If I set it to surface, now the tail is not influenced anymore, and you can see that both sides has been weighted. So I will just reduce the spread, and I can adjust the softness. I do the same for the front leg. So you can see if I increase, same for the nose, it's being influenced by the leg. That's because they are all on the same layer. For now I don't need to add another layer because I can just reduce the radius like this. But if I needed to do this, for example, and I wanted to have the nose to stay here, I could just set an upper layer for the nose. So if I move it from 0 to 1, you can see that now we have two sections here, layer 0 and layer 1 with just the nose, and now the nose influence is on top of all the other ones. So now if I increase the nose influence, it will move everything. So that's up to you and your configurations to figure out what layering is the best. And in our case we don't really need layers here, but it's just to show the feature. So I will do this, and then we can feel that we really need to push the back down. So I will add a last point on the back. So it has been added on the layer 0, but I can just move it on layer 1 now and reduce the radius. You can see if I move layers, the difference in. So this is the layering is about testing. It's behaving like layered skin cluster, for example. So you just need to know that each layer deformation will occur after the result of the previous layer. So if you add a point on the upper layer and you increase the spread, it will override the deformation of previous layer. So usually you do the wide deformations on the first layer, on the layer 0, and then the more you add layers, the smaller the deformation. For example, if you have seen my video about the matching of a human head on a horse head, I used a main on the layer 0. I had one point that dragged all the face area around the nose and the lips toward the muzzle of the horse, and I did the same for the ears that had to go from the side to the top, and then I just refined adding more localized deformation on top. So the wider the deformation, the lower the layer. So you just need to add wide deformations on layer 0 and then refine on other layer. So you don't need to add a lot of pin pairs to have a good result in the end, because we saw in the previous video that even with 0 landmarks we could achieve a perfect match. So here we already started from this shape. We already have here a much closer result to this one, and this should be enough to perform the registration. You can experiment yourself with pin pairs weighting for more advanced deformation, but for this example we will just stop here and see how the registration algorithm performed. And you should do that regularly in order to avoid spending too much energy on the landmarks. So we will just run a few iterations for the registration. So you can see that now it's already been improved. I can add a few more, and then I can just proceed with the refinement. And you can see that now the result is already achieved. So this was about pin pairs weighting, and in the two remaining tutorial videos I will explain additional features which are retargeting, which will allow us to retarget deformation from this mesh and have them on this mesh. And retargeting feature works also when both meshes have the same topology but not the same shape. And then in the last video I will explain the matrix interpolation feature that will allow to retarget controller's position. For example, if you have a rig inside this mesh with controllers or skin joints or any matrix that belongs to this mesh, you can have the result in this mesh space. And it also works whether you have same topology or different topology. The only difference is if you have different topology, you need to perform all these registration steps.